Hello, my friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is David, and it's been a little bit. Um, yeah, not through any bad reason, more of a willing choice on my part to sort of try and align my reading goals with what I wanted to accomplish for a little bit, and to take a break from BookTube and see how everything felt. What I missed about it, and then I got a call from Roger from Michael K. Vaughan's channel. And if you haven't had a chance to talk to Roger, he's a real delight, life of the party, as you would expect from a mummy. And he called to scold me for missing Sumerian September. He was abashed that I hadn't made any videos in all of Sumerian September. I told him, Roger, I haven't missed Sumerian September. He said, yes, it's almost the end of October. And I had to correct him. I think that kind of ruined his mood a little bit, because I think he was excited for Halloween. But I mentioned to him it's just August. I have not missed Sumerian September, nor was I planning to miss Sumerian September. Whether or not it becomes a back for just the month to celebrate the wonderful read-along being hosted by my favorite booktuber, Michael K. Vaughan, who's been a good friend of mine and a supporter of my channel since month 1 of my existence on BookTube. There's no way I was going to miss doing that. And so I reassured him of that. And then he took advantage of scolding me for not really following along in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club very well this month. He rightfully pointed out, all I read was Prisoner of Zenda so far, and I really enjoyed that one. In fact, it's funny, because with my son, I've got this little, it's made by the Usborne Company, and it's got 5 adventure stories in there. So greatly condensed classics in there. And so it's got Count of Monte Cristo, it's got Three Musketeers, it's got Don Quixote, but it also has Prisoner of Zenda in there. So that was really interesting. Right now we're working through the only one that I wasn't familiar with, which is the 39 Steps. My son really enjoyed Don Quixote, which was pretty fun. So anyway, that was a good reminder for me that not only am I going to read 95% just Conan the Barbarian, but I'm also going to be reading Roger's Cheap Old Book Club pick. Which, if you don't know, it's the books are all in the public domain, so you can get an e-copy for free, which is what I plan to do. And it's by Arthur Conan Doyle, who is the creator of Sherlock. So, of course, I would love to read that. And it doesn't seem like it's a very long book. The name's eluding me at the moment, but I'll have it down below in case you want to get a copy for yourself to read along in September. So, well, we'll start with that. September is Conan. I've got 3 volumes, the Del Rey volumes. These are the definitive volumes to read, according to Michael K. Vaughan. And him and I, on September 1st, are both planning on popping open The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian. So, if you don't have this copy, the story I will be starting with, and I'm sure he's going to start with, is going to be the Phoenix on the Sword, followed by the Frost Giant's Daughter, followed by the God in the Bowl, the Tower of the Elephant, Scarlet Citadel, so on and so forth. But whatever Conan volumes you have, you're welcome to follow along. Now, if you've followed Michael's channel for the last couple of years and have followed me at all, you know that every time Michael does something crazy, it's almost a sure thing that I'm going to be 2 steps behind him. So, last week, I believe it was, he announced that he was going to be reading the Lynn Carter and Elspreg de Camp volumes of Conan as well for Samaria September. That there are 12 volumes of these. I happen to know that I had at least one or two on my e-reader. I went looking. I've got 8 of them on my e-reader. I'm missing 4. I have it on good authority that 3 of the 4 that I'm missing are going to be packed into a box and sent my way. So that leaves me with just 1 to try and track down, which I'm pretty sure I could probably do that for a very reasonable amount. And I'm pretty sure that I would have leeway to pick that up, as in spite of the 500 book challenge that I've restarted very, very recently. So let's get into what I've read for this 500 book challenge. So since it's been a while, I figured I'd grab a handful of things that I've read in the last month or two. So I had read There Will Be War, an anthology for BookTube at War in July. And then I read There Won't Be War, which was edited by Harry Harrison and Bruce McAllister. There Will Be War was significantly better than There Won't Be War. The premise on this one was the events leading up to peace on Earth. And peace just isn't that interesting. And a lot of the story is just, I felt just kind of missed the mark on what they were trying to accomplish. There were some highlights in here, to be sure. Joe Haldeman's story, in particular, stood out as a really, really good one. Asimov had a good one, Frustration, that was really enjoyable. Kim Stanley Robinson had one in here. It was my first Kim Stanley Robinson that I had read, and really, really enjoyed it. So, it was really, really hit and miss. A couple of good ones, mostly okay ones. Kind of disappointed in both the anthologies weren't great. But that's okay, because I read some other great things. Like, everything else I read has been fantastic. I continued my Barsoom read-through. So this is book 8, Swords of Mars, which is just outstanding. I've got 3 more books to go, and I'm done with Barsoom. And then I'll be jumping into Tarzan. Well, maybe I'll do Pellucidar first, and then jump back into Tarzan, because there's only a couple Pellucidar. But I'm going to continue to be plugging away at reading through all of the Edgar Rice Burroughs that I have. I recently finished Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. It was my first Arthur C. Clarke full-length book. I forgot this one thing. I'll grab it here in a second. But I read Childhood's End and enjoyed it a fair amount. It didn't live up quite as well as I thought it was from the back. If you remember Bookshelf Tours, I read the backs of all those Arthur C. Clarke books, and this is the one that really stood out. And it was pretty enjoyable as a whole. The other Arthur C. Clarke that I read, actually, forgot to log this one, A Meeting with Medusa. So this was a novella, and this was strongly recommended to me by none other than Scott Danielson himself, which is what led me to pull it off my shelf and give it a read, which then prompted me to want to pick up Childhood's End. I have not read the other side of it, Green Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. I hope to before the end of the month. So I'm going to put this in my currently reading pile so that I don't forget. Because that way I can mark that one off. I finally got around to Sharp's Rifles by Bernard Cornwell. And oh my goodness, this is really good. Cornwell knows what he does well. And when he does it really, really well. He's not the author for everybody. He's going to be very formulaic at times. But if you can enjoy what he's doing, then I don't know that there's a better historical fiction author out there. I could care less about the setting, the period. This was really good. So I was hoping it wasn't, because there's a lot of Sharp series. I mean, at least they're thin. But I I kind of want to read more. But first, I kind of want to pick up the rest of all of the Saxon Chronicles and reread through the early ones and finish the newer ones. But speaking of a formulaic author, who, when they are doing what they do well, does pretty good. Brandon Sanderson. I finally got around to reading The Lost Metal. I picked this up just around Christmas time last year, with the intention of reading it really soon, and absolutely enjoyed it. You know what you're signing up for when you have Sanderson set in his Cosmere, other than these secret projects. This was a good reminder that I do like what he does more than what I've enjoyed from these secret projects so far. And then I did finish an epic collection for X-Men. So this was The Executioner's Song, which the actual part of the Executioner's Song was, only about half of it. For those, a lot of comics leading up to it. The actual Executioner's Song was really, really good. Really good. The ones before it were kind of hit and miss. But it was good. It was firmly set in the early 90s, around the time of the animated cartoon, I think. And you can tell from the cast of characters right there on the front that this centers very much around that. Really enjoyed it. So let's talk about what I'm currently reading. We'll jump into the comic next. So after I finished that epic collection, I decided to break my streak of reading an X-Men a day, because I wanted to dive back into this saga. As you can see, I am getting really close to being done. There are 54 in here, and I'm on 40. So I've got 14 more. So in 2 weeks, I will be done with this big tome, unless I happen to read a couple of extra here and there, which I'm prone to do. Speaking of Bernard Cornwell earlier, I am about halfway through Excalibur, which is book 3 in the Warlord Chronicles, which has been, I think it might be taking the right turns to be my favorite of the trilogy. I don't know. The Enemy of God, book 2, was a really, really strong installment, and we'll see how he sticks landing on this to be able to determine which one in that trilogy I really enjoy. I'm hearing really early bad reviews from people watching the Warlord Chronicles. My understanding is they're seeing a couple of the episodes, that they have access to just the first couple and are judging it based on that. And I'll use a recent example. I just got done watching the series Andor with my wife. And had I watched the first 3 or 4 episodes and then sat down to review that 12-episode season, I would have probably said it was kind of slow developing, kind of plodding, not a lot of things really coming together. But it really came through by the end. So, even if it turns out to not be fantastic, I'm very interested. I'm far more interested in that than, say, Wheel of Time Season 2 or Rings of Power Season 2 or anything like that. So, TV, I'm looking forward to Warlord Chronicles and Ahsoka. Eventually, I'm going to get back to this. I read the first 2 issues out of 5 the other day. And haven't touched it probably in about 2 weeks. Apparently, this is a volume 2 when I punched it in. So this has got Captain America 8 through 9 and 11 through 14. So I've read 8 through 9. When I punched it in, this turns out to be a volume 2 on Captain America Winter Soldier. So I don't think this is the Captain America Winter Soldier that I was hoping to get. But that's okay. It's still good. So I've got 2 more things to talk about here, and then I'm going to wrap up. I am almost done reading. I'm buddy reading this with Scott Danielson. This is the Little Book of Exoplanets. So we were talking about doing a buddy read at some point in time. And he mentioned a couple of categories, and one of them was science books, space science books. I told him, my inclination is to avoid that because I don't read science books. But that was the reason why I said, let's lean into that. Pick one out, and I'll read it with you. And he picked this, The Little Book of Exoplanets. This is by Joshua Wynn. It's got 8 chapters in there. We read the first 2 chapters for a week. We both decided it was extremely readable. It's gotten a little tougher from there, but it's still pretty accessible to just about anybody that has an interest. A lot of it's definitely going over my head. But as he pointed out, 2 summers ago when we read The Silmarillion, Scott, Steve Donahue, and myself, he was definitely in that everything's going over his head. Steve and myself were the masters of that subject, and he was the Padawan. And so now the roles have been reversed. So I'm enjoying this. I enjoy hearing his thoughts on it and the ideas that it's leading him down. It's one that I don't think it's going to stick well with my first read, but it's one that I probably would want to go back to at some point in time and see if it sinks in a little bit deeper, because it's really interesting stuff. And then last but not least, on a whim, I picked up and started reading Swords Against Death by Fritz Leiber. This is book 2 in the Fafhrd and Grey Matter series. So I have book 1 on my shelf. I've got books 6 and 7 on my shelf. I've got the rest of them on my e-reader. So I've got 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I even have 6 and 7 on. I might even have 1 on my e-reader. I probably have them all. Knowing who sent them my way, I probably have them all. My goodness. If I wasn't already reading really interesting stuff, I had to set this aside to finish Childhood's End. I'm still really, really interested in Excalibur. And if I wasn't buddy reading Exoplanets with Scott, I'd probably be reading mostly this. As it stands, as soon as Exoplanets finishes, I'll probably try and knock off that Green Mars, keep plugging away through Excalibur, and then spend the last part of the month getting through that labor there. So there you go. There's an update for what I've been doing, what I've read. For those interested, so I was originally going to count comics in part of my reading for the 500 book challenge, but since Michael doesn't, I'm not going to. So my number is 10 right now. With, one more probably wrapping up in the next day or two. And then a couple more soon to follow after that. So I'm looking forward to Siberia in September. I'm going to be reading nothing but Conan and the book for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. And then whatever comics I happen to be reading, because I've only got 4 issues on my shelf of Conan that I haven't read. So rather than revisit the Marvel early epic collections that I just read recently, I'll use that as my free exploration time to give myself a palate cleanser from Conan. So, I will catch you later.